It is Read With Me Wednesday. I am hoping that you'll follow along as I read The Case of the Gasping Garbage, Chapter 2 today. So go and get your book and read with me this Wednesday.
Okay, readers, if you missed last week's Read With Me Wednesday, you might actually want to put this assignment on hold. Go to last week's Read With Me Wednesday and first follow along and read Chapter 1, because we are on Chapter 2 today. So to be able to turn to Chapter 2, you can head to the contents and find 2 titled Great Gasping Garbage, and it is on, right here it says, you guessed it, page 10. So we can jump right ahead to page 10. And there we are, Chapter 2, Great Gasping Garbage. Let's see what happens if the garbage problem is solved. Or I should say, if the problem mystery is solved. Drake and Nell slogged through mud puddles, lugging the garbage can between them. For a monster, it wasn't very heavy. Even so, Drake slipped and almost fell because his glasses had fogged. Nell helped him up and brushed him off. She was a great partner. And besides, she was his best friend. Finally, they pushed the garbage can through Drake's back door, dragged it up 2 flights of stairs and into the attic lab. They set the garbage can in a corner next to a heater. "We must simulate the same environment," said Drake. 87 degrees to be precise, said Nell. Drake cleaned his glasses and put on his white lab coat. Nell did too, except she didn't have any glasses to clean. They stuck sharpened pencils behind their ears, sat on stools, and opened their lab notebooks. Drake pulled a book off the shelf and shuffled through it until he found the right page. It read, "Monster Analysis, What to Do When Your Garbage is Gasping." Just then, Drake's mom poked her head in the lab. Kate Doyle was a fine cook and ran her own catering company from home. Blueberry muffins were her specialty. Now Mrs. Doyle asked if they wanted any hot chocolate with their muffins, seeing that it was such a damp, drizzly day. "No thanks," Drake said politely. "Just muffins." "Coffee, decaf, black," said Nell, and she shoved a pencil behind her ear. Nell forgot she had already had a pencil behind her other ear. "Affirmative," Drake's mom said, and closed the door. Real scientists don't drink hot chocolate. Ditto for real detectives. And Drake and Nell were both. "Let's go over the facts again," said Nell. Drake nodded. "Just the facts, ma'am." Together they pored over their observations. After a while, Drake's dad stuck his head in the lab. Now, Sam Doyle owned a science equipment and supply company. He regularly brought home used equipment for the lab: computers, microscopes, telescopes, glassware, Bunsen burners, even an old sink that he had plumbed with hot and cold water. If either Drake or Nell needed equipment, Mr. Doyle was the man. Now Mr. Doyle glanced at the rumbling garbage can and told them to be careful. "We will," said Drake and Nell. Mr. Doyle rolled his eyes and closed the door. "What's he think we're going to do?" asked Drake. "Blow up the lab?" "You did last time," reminded Nell. "That's beside the point. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. Based on our observations, scientist Nell, I have formulated a hypothesis." All through the evening they worked. Later, Mrs. Doyle brought them tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches with a pickle on the side. Mrs. Doyle always cooked from her vegetarian menu whenever Nell was around, because Nell was a vegetarian. Drake and Nell washed their hands and sat at Drake's desk, knowing they should never eat or drink while conducting experiments. They were top-notch scientists. After supper, Nell called her mother and asked if she could stay extra late, given that there was no school tomorrow and that they were swamped with experiments and under a deadline. Ann Fossey was a biology professor at Mossy Lake University. Her specialty was wildlife biology. Goodness gracious sakes alive, exclaimed Professor Fossey. Sounds like you're a busy scientist. Now don't you worry about a thing, my dear. I'll be sure to feed your rats and lizards. And don't forget my snakes and bugs. Of course, dear, said Professor Fossey. I'll leave the light on for you. Finally, after midnight, just when Nell was on her 4th cup of decaf, they had their answer. In the morning, Nell hurried back to Drake's house. They called Gabby first thing. Meet us in the lab, said Nell. We've discovered the identity of the monster. After Gabby arrived, Drake paced the floor while Nell sat on a stool. You see, Ms. Talberg, Drake was saying, it's really quite simple. Nell? Thank you, Detective Drake. First of all, said Nell, the garbage can sounded hollow when we tapped on it. Second, the garbage can wasn't too heavy. You see, Ms. Talberg, said Drake, most monsters are quite heavy. In addition, added Nell, the garbage can was stored in a very warm environment. We copied that environment in our lab by setting the can next to the heater and checking its temperature. But most important, the garbage can smelled like bread. Remember, your dad is a baker, said Drake. The best baker around, to be exact. Therefore, based on the clues and our observations, I developed an educated guess, what we scientists call a hypothesis. I believed that the monster lurking inside your garbage can was not really a monster at all, but... Yes? Gabby asked, her eyes wide. Yeast, said Drake. Pure and simple yeast. Yeast? Yes, yeast. Allow scientist Nell to explain. Nell pointed to a chalkboard with her long wooden pointer. As I said, the smell of fresh baked bread was our biggest clue. You see, yeast is used in making bread. Yeast is a living fungus that eats starches and sugars. They then turn the starches and sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. Garbage can clues. 1. Sounded hollow. 2. Wasn't heavy. 3. Warm environment. 4. Smelled like bread. 5. Gabby's dad, a baker. The tiny bubbles in bread, said Drake, are the result of carbon dioxide gas. Nell tapped the chalkboard with her pointer. You see, Gabby, your dad must have thrown away a combination of yeast and flour, ingredients used in baking bread, easily purchased at any grocery store. Drake pushed up his glasses. With the right amount of moisture and a warm environment, added Nell. The yeast was able to grow and multiply by feeding on the flour inside the can, finished Drake. Quite harmless, really. But the yeast produced so much carbon dioxide gas that the garbage can simply had to burp to release some of the gas. We tested our hypothesis, said Nell, with a thorough set of experiments. We examined the yeast under the microscope and grew it in several different mediums. We've positively identified yeast as your culprit. You can be certain there is no monster inside your garbage can. Naturally, Gabby was a little disappointed. After all, yeast was not as exciting as a blood-sucking monster. She shook her hands anyway for a job well... she shook their hands anyway for a job well done. I knew you could do it, she said. I can't wait to tell all my friends. Nell handed Gabby their business card. Call us anytime. Later that day, Drake wrote in his lab notebook. Monster analysis, a success. Hypothesis, correct. Received 2 prize loaves of bread. Extra raisins, extra nuts as payment. Rating on the delicious scale, 10. Paid in full. Thanks for reading with me, 3rd graders.
I wonder what the mystery will be next week. We're bound to find out if you join me right here on Read With Me Wednesday with the case of the gasping garbage.